Hello, 8th graders. Welcome to a video recorded lesson. This is lesson 8 for 8th grade math. Please turn to that part of your packet. If you have other lessons, those are incomplete work that you can turn in for credit for the last quarter. Please get that stuff done as we have to print grades soon and get whatever you can done, but the lesson for this week is lesson 8, and it is on roots. So, getting started. Our vocabulary for this set of chapters. We have square root, let me restart. Hello 8th graders. This is a video recorded lesson. I will be trying to do these from now on. This is lesson 8 on your math. It is about roots. If you have other math in your worksheet that is incomplete work from earlier in the semester, you can turn it in for credit up until Friday when we are finalizing grades. Please get that done and turned in. For this lesson, let's go over a few things that you need. One is a quiet place to work, a place where you can listen to me, hear me talk, and see what I'm doing. Second, you need some form of writing utensil. It can be a pencil, a pen, a special mechanical pencil your girlfriend gave you. I don't really care which you use, but you need some kind of writing utensil. You will also need your math sheets themselves for lesson 8, and some scratch paper will be come in very handy. Starting off, we have vocabulary. What is a square root? A square root is a factor of a number. It is a factor of a number that is multiplied by itself to get to equal So, for example, the factors of 4 is 2 times 2. Since 2 is multiplied by itself to equal 4, 2 equals the square root of 4. For 9, factors of 9 are 3 times 3. So 3 equals the square root of 4. $36 equals 2 times 3 times 2 times 3. And we can group this in a couple different ways. We can have 4 times 9. We can have, which is just 2 times 3, which is 4 times 9. Or we can group it as 2 times 2 times 3, which is 4 times 12 times 3. Or we can group it as, group it so that we have 2 times 3 times 2 times 3, which is 6 times 6. So 6 as when you factor a 6 out of 36, you are left with 6. So 6 is the square root of 36, because a square root is a factor of a number that is multiplied by itself to equal the number. So 6 is a factor of 36 that when multiplied by itself equals 36. So it is a square root. So what do we think that the word square root means? A factor times itself. How does this word fit with other words and concepts I know? Well, last week we were looking at squaring things and raising things to powers. So this is basically the opposite of that. It's the opposite of squaring, where we take x and we raise it to 2. This is basically undoing that. Parts of the words that I recognize, well, I bet we recognize the word square. And what makes this an important word for me to know? Because it allows us to do exponents. Now we can undo exponents. What is the relationship between squaring a number and finding the square root? They are opposites. The real world length. The square base of the Great Pyramid of Giza covers almost 562,500 square feet. How could you determine the length of each side of the base? So, how do we find this? Well, we find a factor of 562,500 that multiplied by itself gives us 562,500. So we find a factor of 562,500 that when multiplied by itself gives us 562,500. I think it ends up being 750. You can check my math if you want with a calculator, but I think it is time for us to move on to the next page. You can pause the video at any time if you need to slow down. Next page. A square root of a number is one of its two equal factors. Good. Other way of putting it. How do we symbolize? People tell them that we are making a square root. Well, if x squared equals y, then x is the square root of y. The square root of y. For example, 5 squared equals 25. So 5 equals the square root of 25. An important note here is that every positive number, this is going to be very important later, every positive number has both a positive and a negative square root. That is very important for you to remember for later. In most real-world situations, only the positive or principal square root is considered. There is a negative square root always. We don't normally care. A radical sign, that little thing that I made over here, is used to indicate the principal square root. So if n2 equals a, then n equals, if we want to say the positive or negative, the principal square root is the positive one. So if all we want is the positive, then we just put like that. If we want the positive or negative, then we can put that negative, plus or minus, square root. Remember this when you get to Algebra 1. Or actually, well, I don't know if they teach it in Algebra 2. It might be Algebra 2. That will become important to you when you deal with parabolas. Next up, examples. Find the square root. So, square root of 64. Square root of 64. How do we find what the square root of 64 is? Well, easiest way to find what the square root of something is to factor it. So 64 equals, well, it's positive, so we know we can pull out a 2. What are we left with? So it's 2 times 32. Can we still pull out a 2? Yes. Now we have 2 times 2 times, what's 32 divided by 2? 16. Can we still pull out a 2? Yes, we can. 2 times 2 times 2 times, what's 16 divided by 2? 8. 2 times 2 times 2 times 8. Can we divide 8 by 2? Yes, we can. 2 times 2 times 2 times 2 times, what's 8 divided by 2? 4. And I think you get the point. times 2. So, what are all the factors? Now, we have to figure out how do we divide this so that we end up with two numbers that are the same. With this one, it's pretty easy. So, we have 2 times 2 times 2, which is 8. 2 times 2 times 2, which is 8. What is the square root of 64? It is 8. Number 2. This time, we are finding the positive or negative square root of 1.21. So, what are the factors of 1.21? What can we multiply to get to 1.21? Well, those of you who have been working on your multiplication tables know that 11 times 11, and this is the only things, multiplied together equals 121. So if we put a point there, 1.1 times 1.1 equals 1.21. That is our factors. What is our square root? 1.1. So, our square roots are positive 1.1 times positive 1.1 or negative 1.1 times negative 1.1. Now it's very important that you notice that you cannot multiply negative 1.1 times positive 1.1 and end up with a positive 1.21. So you can multiply the negatives times the negatives, and you can multiply the positives times the positives. You cannot multiply across those two, though. Remember that. So, plus or minus 1.1. That is our answer. They both have to be positive, but they both have to be negative. Next up, 3. The negative square root of 25 over 36. Let me make that a little bit clearer. So, how do we find the negative square root of this? First, we break the 25 up. What is the square root of 25? Well, it's pretty easy. What multiplied by itself equals 25. Well, what are the factors of 25? Factors of 25 are 5 times 5. So what multiplied by itself equals 25? 5. 36, what multiplied by itself equals 36? Well, 36 equals 2 times 2 times 3 times 3. We can group this as 2 times 3 and 2 times 3, and that gives us 6 times 6. So, we're now taking the square root of this, which means we're taking for this top part 5, bottom part 6. So, 5 over 6. And here's the important part. The important part is that we put a negative sign here. It is the negative square root. Now over here, number 4. The square root of negative 16. And the answer is, it is not possible. Later on in Algebra 2, or maybe it's pre-calc, you will learn that that is actually a lie. But for right now, it is not possible. We are not going to deal with imaginary numbers. They aren't real and they don't exist. Moving on to the next part. A. The square root of 9 over 16. So, what are the factors of 9? Well, 9 equals 3 times 3. What are the square factors of 16? 16 equals 4, or, well, sorry, I should do this the whole way. 2 times 2 times 2 times 2. Group them together. 2 times 2, 2 times 2. That is 4 times 4. So we can rewrite this as 3 times 3 over 4 times 4, which we can now rewrite as 3 times 3 over 4 times 4. What is the square root of 3 times 3? Well, the fact that multiplied by itself gives you back the number. You know what that is? That's a 3. So we have 3 over the square root of 4 times 4. Doing the same thing for this one. We have 3 over 4. So A, what is our answer? 3 over 4. B, plus or minus the square root of 0.81. What times itself equals 0.81? You guys can use your calculators if you would like, but it is 0.09 times 0.09. Put another 0 in front. So, what is our square root? We can rewrite this as 0.09 Okay, going on to number B, plus or minus. Remember that is important. The square root of 0.81. What are the factors of 0.81? Well, it is 0.9 times 0.9, and so we can rewrite this. 1 equals that as plus or minus 0.9 times 0.9. What is, since square root is a factor times itself, it gives you back the original thing. We have that now. We can go ahead and get rid of that. So we have plus or minus 0.9. I will do C here. Negative square root of 49. What times itself? It gives us 49. I do believe it is 7 times 7. Rewriting 7 times 7. And since we now have a factor times itself to give us back that original number, we can just do that and we get negative 7. And D. The square root negative 100. What times itself gives us a negative 100? It is not possible. putting down our numbers, we have 3/4 plus or minus 0.9 minus 7 and NP. Not possible. Moving on. Now we have to solve it as part of an equation. We have an equation of t squared equals 169. So we have t squared. To get rid of the t squared, we are taking the square root of both sides. Now we have the square root of t squared equals the square root of 169. Since this and that cancel out, blink, we just have t equals the square root 169. And what times itself equals 169? Check on your calculators, but it is 13. So t equals either positive 13 or negative 13. How do we check? We take these numbers here and we plug them in for t up here. We rewrite the equation. We now have t squared, and we have on this side t equals 13. Over here, t equals negative 13. We have t squared equals 169 equals 169. We are replacing t with 13. Now we have 13 squared negative 13 squared equals 169. So 13 times 13, you can check on your calculators. 13 times 13 does in fact 169 equal 169. Now on this one, negative. Remember that negative. I have to do negative 13 times negative 13. To rewrite this, it is negative 13 times negative 13. We have to have negative on both of them. Equals 169, and then 13 times, or negative 13 times negative 13 is 169. Negative times a negative is always a positive. So I should show you guys that step in here too. 13 squared is 13 times 13 equals 169. And 13 times 13 is 169 equals 169. So, substituting back in, we can see it is true. Okay. Next up, let's check. What is the square root of e 289 equals a squared? Now, we take square roots of both sides. 289 equals the square root of a squared. Now, the square root of 289 equals a, because the square root and the square cancel. Now, what is the square root of 289? And for this one, we are finding both the positive and the negative, because they will both make this equation true. but it's going to be, I think, 17. Either positive or negative 17. E F M squared equals 0.09. Now we take the square root, positive or negative, of m2 equals 0.09. Square root, positive or negative. This gives us these cancel, so m equals plus or minus the square root of 0.09. What can we multiply together to get 0.09 that is the same as itself? Well, those of you who needed your calculators should be done by about now. Plus or minus 0.03. That is our answer. And next, G. Y squared equals 4 over 25. Y equals squared, so we can take the square root of that. Y squared equals 4 squared over 25 squared. Oh, shit. Okay, how we solve this one? We have y squared equals 4 divided by 25. We take the square root of one side, we have to take the square root of the other. That gives us the square root and the y plus or minus, plus or minus. That cancels out, so now we have y equals the square root of 4 over 25. Now we can further split this apart because we don't want to have to do this all as one thing all together by looking at what does 4 equal and what does 25 equal and solving it individually like that. So we can, since anything we do to the top we can do to the bottom, we can split this squaring up and take the square root of the top and the square root of the bottom. So now we have square root of 4 over the square root of 25. Square root of 4 is, well, factors of 4 are 2 times 2, so y equals 2 over the square root of 25. Factors of 25 are 5 and 5, so y equals 2 over 5. And I need to make certain that I have my plus or my minus, plus or 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 minus. So y equals plus or minus the square root of 2 over 5. I'm going to write it as this is probably the simplest form. And I think it is time for us to go on to the next page. Next up, cube roots. A cube root of a number is one of its three equal factors. So in this case, instead of it being one number times itself, it's one number times itself 3 times. So, cube root equals a factor of a number that when multiplied by itself 3 times equals that number. We say it, well, symbolize it. We can say x cubed equals y. If x cubed equals y, and here's the symbol. X equals the cube root of y. Now that little thing there, if we put a 3 there, if we don't put anything there, it's just the square root. If we put a 3 there, it's a cube root. If we put a 25 there, that is the 25th root, which means we would do a number times itself 25 times. I've never seen anything more than like the 5th or 6th root. Some numbers like 8, 27, and 64 are perfect cubes because they are cubes of integers, which means 2 times 2 times 2 equals 8. 3 times 3 times 3 equals 27. And 4 times 4 times 4 equals 64. So 2 to the third equals 8 because we have 2 to the 1, 2, 3. 3 to the third equals 27 because we have 3 times 1, 2, 3. And 4 to the third equals 64 because we have 1, 2, 3. So how do we find the cube root of number? Well, we have 3 cube root of 125. What times itself 3 times is equal 125? Well, since we know it ends with a 5, we know that one of the factors is 5. And what times, what are we left over with? Well, if we divided that by 5, 12 divided by that is 2. We only left over 2, well, 2, so 25. Can we take another 5 out of that? Why, yes, we can. So 5 times 5 times, what's left over? 5. So, what is our cube root? It is 5. For 7, the cube root of negative 27. Here's the big difference. You can take a cube root of a negative number. You cannot take a square root, but you can take a cube root. So those negatives are no longer an obstacle. What are the factors of 27? Well, 3 times 9. And we have 3 times 9. Okay. Oh, they have to be negative. Negative 3 and negative 9. What are the factors of 9? Well, we have negative 3 times negative 3 times negative 3. What's the cube root? 3. Okay, cube root of 729. Go ahead and get out your calculators. Cube root is 9, I do believe. Yeah, even I don't know that one in my head. HI cube root of negative 64. Remember, again, we can take the cube root of we can take a cube root of a negative because a negative times a negative times a negative equals a negative, whereas a negative times a negative equals a positive. So can't take negative, can't take the cube root of, or can't take the square root of a positive or negative. Like that's tongue twister. My brain is mush now. So cube root of negative 64 is negative 4. This is negative, so is this. And cube root of 1,000. Well, what times what equals 1,000? 10. So, there you go. Number 8. Dylan has a planter in the shape of a cube that holds 8 cubic feet of potting soil. Solve the equation 8 equals s to the third to find the side length s of the container. So 8 equals s to the third. Now, we take the cube root of both sides. Cube root of 8 equals the cube root of s to the third. These cancel out. We are left with s equals the cube root of 8. The cube root of 8 is 2. And to check, we take this and we put it back in for s, and we look at s equals 2 to the 3, and that is 8 equals 2 times 2 times 2, because we have 3, there's still 3 there. 1, 2, 3, 2 times 2 times 2 is in fact 8. We are correct. Moving on. An aquarium has, in the shape of a cube, an aquarium in the shape of a cube that will hold 25 gallons of water. Has a volume of 3.375 cubic feet. It holds 25 gallons, which equals 3.375 cubic feet. We are trying to find out how long one side of this aquarium is. We're looking for what is what are one of these sides' length? We find that because if we find this side times this side, that gives us the area, and multiply it by this other side here. So S times S times S gives us the volume. Side to the third power equals volume, and volume equals 3.375. How do we solve this? Well, S to the third power equals 3.375 to the third. These cancel out. S equals cube root of 3.375. What is the cube root of 3.375? S equals 1.5 feet. Oops, this is falling off. S equals 1.5 feet. Number 1. The negative square root of 1.69. Remember, if the square root is on the inside, we can't do it. If the square root's on the outside, it's perfectly fine. So this equals what times itself equals 1.69, and negative 1.3. You guys can do it in your calculators. I don't care. I can't do these in my head either. Number 2. Plus or minus, we need both positive and negative, square root of 49 over 144. We can split that up. We have plus or minus square root of 49 over the square root of 144. Square root of 49 equals plus or minus 7 over plus or minus square root of 144 plus or minus square root of 7 plus or minus 12. You guys can put it into your calculator again. I think the final form would be plus or minus 7 over 12. That's the simplest form. 3 square root of negative 1.44. This is not possible because you cannot take the square root of a negative. And next up, we solve each equation. Take the square root of each side. Square root cancels that. P equals the square root of 36. What times itself? What factor of 36 times itself gives us 36 back? P equals 6. And this is a plus or minus, because I do not want to forget my pluses or minuses. 5 t squared equals 1 over 9. Take the square root of t squared equals the square root plus or minus of 1 over 9. That cancels that. T equals plus or minus 9. T equals plus or minus 1 over plus or minus 9. T equals, what is the square root of 1? Plus or minus 1. What is the square root of 9? Plus or minus 3. Simplest form is probably T equals plus or minus 1 over 3. And number 6. .25 equals r squared. The square root of 6.25 equals the square root of r squared. These cancel. Plus or minus there. Plus or minus square root of 6.25 equals r. And what times itself equals 625, 15. No. 2.5. Plus or minus 2.5 equals r. 7. The cube root of 216 equals, what times itself 3 times equals 216? 6. Because 6 to the third equals 216. H. The cube root of negative 125. Remember, a negative inside of a cube root is fine. It equaled negative 5. And 9. Cube root of negative 8 equals negative 2. I'm going ahead and filling in all my answers because I have not done that yet. 1.3 negative plus or minus 7 over 2. Not possible. Plus or minus 6. Plus or minus 1 over 3. Plus or minus 2.5. 6, negative 5, negative 2. Number 10. A cube-shaped box can hold 729 cubic inches of packing material. Solve 729 equals s to the third to find the length of one side of the box. So we have a cube. We're looking for side, side, side. We're looking for the length of one of the sides. So we have 729 equals s to the third. Take the cube root of both sides. These cancel. Cube root of 729 29 is 9 equals S. So why do I need to use square roots and cube roots? Basically for this kind of problem, where you're trying to find how big of a box you need. Okay. I want you guys to try and do the independent practice on your own and do the, I'll have you guys do the odds. Okay? And then on the next page, go ahead and keep doing the odds. All the way through. Good luck. If you need any help, you can call me. I will talk to you guys later.